Thank you very much, Nancy Ochido, for that very comprehensive report about one Joseph who has been living with cerebral palsy, representing the many people who are living with disabilities in this country. Now, we are joined on set with Mr. Joseph Atela, an advocate who fights for the rights of people living with disability. We want to break down their lives and their rights, their progress in this country to be able to be joined into the society and actually play their roles as equal people, and they are equal people. So here's Joseph Atela, and thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you so much, Chris.
Okay, we want to apologize for the technical hit we had earlier and the up and downs around here, but we're going to go straight into this issue. The Constitution has put aside a specific part that touches on people living with disability. Kindly help me break down the general rights that people living with disability have been given and has been particularly enshrined in the Constitution.
First, I would like to remind you that persons with disabilities, the laws or human rights instruments that speak on behalf of persons with disabilities are a bit many. And when we start with the Kenyan Constitution of 2010, we have the Persons with Disabilities Act of 2003. We have the UNCRPD, and we have the UNCRC. So when you talk about issues disability, the the legal instruments, we refer to those ones.
So when we focus on our 2010 Constitution, there's statements from Section 54 says a person living with disability must be treated with dignity and respect, must have access to education, must have access to all places and buildings. Can you help me understand what this means in a legal and a very, in a way that a person with disability feels it must be understood?
Yeah, for sure. Article 54 of the Constitution clearly spells what or how persons with disabilities should be treated, especially in our country. And concerning education, that is again in the Bill of Rights, that is chapter 4 of the Constitution, and it's empowered when it comes to issues children with disabilities. So we'll go for the UN Convention on Rights of the Child, because we ratified such instruments. So we'll work with them as well. There is the Children's Act, and there is as well Article 34 that informs or gives anyone a right to be, to have good information, and education is a good information that everyone should have, especially people with disabilities. Yeah, so when it comes to accessibility, this is part 3 of the Persons with Disabilities Act, and it falls under rights and privileges that people with disabilities should enjoy as by the PWD's Act of 2003. And this one is a bit, it's the white elephant in the house, because a good section or a good number of parts of the Act talks about accessibility, and you find that from Section 21 to Section 28, it all states how buildings, how offices, how public facilities should be friendly to people with disabilities. And you find that none of it has been, responded to positively. And it's the biggest challenge. And it's even enshrined in Article 9 of the UN Convention on Rights of Persons with Disabilities. So this is a big challenge. And I think the reason why it has not been taken well is that disability sector or the movement has not been out well to inform people, both individuals, institutions, or the private firms, about the incentives or exemptions that these people have when they comply with the accessibility thing.
Okay.
Yes.
So you've mentioned a couple of things, but I have 2 questions. The
Yes.
first one, is it a crime for us right now, for any institution or any place that is supposed to serve the public needs, not to have accessibility for someone who's living with disability?
It's a crime.
Punishable by law? How is it punishable by law?
I mean, it's punishable because it is stated in the Act. And the Act is a law. And the Act is supported by the Constitution, you know? Yeah, and even it's supported by the UNCRPD. So it's a crime, generally.
You mentioned that people lack the knowledge about these sort of rights and these sort of privileges that a person living with disability is supposed to have. Has there been any efforts on your side, or people who are advocates for people living with disability, to bring these issues to the light, such that we are able to understand that this and this is what is expected of us, of all of us?
Yeah, thank you for that question, Christine. And I would like to say that there's been silence concerning that. I mean, there is the Council for People with Disabilities, and it's well mandated to at least enlighten the community, and with the help of disabled persons organizations. Yeah. So these two institutions, when they come together, and currently we are really pushing for a bit longer time. I can say the council didn't have the chair, who is the political wing of the council. So, you know, when it comes to, informing the society, you really need somebody who will handle the hard tasks or the hard questions that will come from the audience that we will be addressing. So right now, we thank God, the council got the chair, and he promised. I'm normally close to him. We do have meetings, especially when it comes to issues with disabilities, when there is a challenge. He receives calls, and we even meet. So he promised that the biggest thing that is going to work on, the biggest thing that is going to make sure that people with disabilities, people with all kinds of disabilities, enjoy accessibility. And accessibility is not only the stairs, it's not only making the ramps and the likes. When people with disabilities cannot access, like the deaf, when they cannot follow a program, their rights are infringed concerning accessibility. They also need to follow like TV programs. They need, when there is a program that starts from 8 before news time, and in most cases we see that it's only news time that they enjoy following with us. The rest, they just look at the photos, the pictures of what's going on.
Let me interject you, because you'll be able to,
yeah, sure.
Comfortably explain about accessibility. Sure. I want to go to work.
Yeah.
I want to bring an issue of somebody who's gotten a disability in the course of work. For instance, a soldier goes on to war and they come back with a disability. Then suppose a leg has been amputated, an arm has been amputated, they've lost their sight. What are their rights? And how do they go about life after that, being an able person, and now you're living with a disability?
They have rights. Since for them to work in such positions,
let's focus on an employer. What should an employer be able to do this particular person?
First, I will talk about the employee.
Okay.
Yeah, the employee signed the contract, and within the contract, hopefully, they are protected by the Employment Act of Kenya 207, and as well, there is the Public Health Act. So the employee is protected, and it's only the only challenge is that these people normally they don't have the information on how they can, get assistance.
Can you break down these acts that you've mentioned for us? The Health Act, the Employment Act, especially when you're referring it to specifically to a person who's acquired a disability in the course of work. Yeah,
in the Employment Act, there is this, an opening, or that states that when one is permanently or partially incapacitated, this means that the person is not in a position to handle the tasks that he or she used to handle, with ease.
Yes.
So this person, when this happens, when he or she was on duty, the person needs to be compensated as per the regulations under the Act and as per the contract that they signed.
Okay, let me move to the privileges and incentives that are being offered to employers in case they accommodate more people living with disabilities. It's interesting to note that the country, or the constitution of this country, says that we must have at least 5% of all employees enjoying contracts and public and private sector work. So what are these incentives that we must know about?
The incentives, one that can really motivate an employer is the exemption. A number of, like all companies, it is legal for all companies that trade or do anything that relates with money. It's legal for them to file returns. So Section 35 of the Persons with Disabilities Act states on how these employers can benefit if they meet the 5% minimal requirement.
And which include?
Sorry?
The incentives, they include?
The incentives include, the most important one is the exemption. There is an exemption of from 20% when they do returns, yes.
Okay, let me move to health. I have read from the National Council of People Living with Disability that they have a role that within the health sector of this country, they must be able to detect any sort of disability. They must be able to rehabilitate any sort of disability. In a hospital setting, a person living with disability must have access to a health worker who can directly help them. How is that coming along in this country, and what can be done to make it better if it still is in the country?
When it comes to health and rehabilitation, there are specific institutions there is Kijabe, there is Nyabondo, and a few other institutions that are in charge of rehabilitating people with disabilities. So these institutions have their policies, and we can't say that as well they work with the laws of the land, and they usually follow, the laws when they are doing this.
Okay, so what do you envision in this country in terms of equality? What is the end game? For instance, Vision 2030 states that there will be equality. And we look at a middle income country with equality, and every person is able to contribute to this country's economy and socially in an equal capacity such that the country grows. So what do you envision, especially in concern to people living with disability?
I am hopeful, as a God-fearing person, I'm hopeful that one day the people I represent, or persons with disabilities, will enjoy the rights and privileges. But it will take time. We are not yet there because the challenges we have are that people with disability are still, discriminated. And you find that even in the last recruitment of the census that is supposed to take place, you find that people with disabilities who are qualified, and nowadays by the majority are educated. They have diplomas and they have degrees and certificates. As you have seen my brother there, he has been struggling through all those odds to acquire his diploma. So you find that there is still discrimination. How will this person on wheelchair, perform this duty? Not knowing that nowadays technology is there. It has done everything possible. It's just a click of a button, Okay. So we'll push. It needs synergy, and it needs all institutions, both public and private institutions, to come together and help us. Yes, and in the meantime, I would also ask or request people, other organizations, we call them
United Nations.
Yes, organizations that should come on board, and again, disabled persons organizations that are led mostly in most cases by persons with disabilities themselves. They should also come together and make sure that they work towards achieving this goal of inclusion and at least reduce this discrimination. Yeah.
Discrimination seems to be a major thing currently facing the people with disability. But we're going to end this conversation here. Very fruitful, very informative about it. And we're going to move on. And we really appreciate you coming on board to be able to help us understand legally where the state is on this particular matter.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Before I leave, yes.
We're going to be able to have this conversation just right now, but after this particular story. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's okay. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Well, we move on. Here's Elizabeth.